How many of you out there are like me? And by that I mean, how many of you out there have made a mistake or two or three in your collecting past that you still think about, that still keeps you up at night, that makes you think, man, if only I hadn't done that? If you've been there, and I'm guessing we all have, then today's guest has a message for you. Good. It's good that we screwed up. Today's guest is Andrew, Fair Star Cards on Instagram, and he's sort of a failure specialist. What I mean by that is that Andrew is a high school teacher who has learned to incorporate the value and benefits of failure into his teaching. Failure isn't just something to deal with. It's something we should embrace. In this episode of The Shallow End, we tap into Andrew's expertise to discuss how failure makes us better in the hobby and how we use our experiences, both positive and negative, to get our collecting, our collections, and ourselves to the places we want to be. I'm Dave Schwartz, Iowa Dave Sports Cards on Instagram. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get started. Let's welcome in now to The Shallow End somebody who I've been talking to on Instagram for a while, and I'm really excited to finally get a chance to talk to in person about a number of things. His name is Andrew. He is Fair Star Cards on IG. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to this, Dave.
Yeah, same. Can't wait to talk about some stuff. I told the folks during the intro that you are a specialist in failure, and I said that tongue in cheek, right? Because you're a teacher and you understand the value of failure and how it can be a learning experience, and we will get back to that in just a while. But let's get to know you a little bit first. What is your background in collecting?
Well, probably not terribly unique in that I collected as a kid. Now, the one thing that was unique was probably my experiences as a kid. I had an older sister who, I still have an older sister, but she dated a guy who she's no longer dating, who was big into sports cards. And so he taught me how to look after cards. And so probably unlike a lot of other people, when I started into the hobby as a 9-year-old all the way up to pretty much late high school, I guess, I didn't put them in the spokes of my tires. I didn't throw them against the wall and things like that. So that was the one thing that's probably unique. Maybe it was good, I think it was good, but it was also bad in that I probably didn't play with cards as much. But I did sort them. I loved sorting through them, and I'd sort them into teams, and then I'd get sick of that, and I'd sort them into season and by year. But I pretty much always had them sleeved, and of course the valuable ones, the nice ones, the rookies, the big guns. Of course, the Don Mattingly's, which didn't turn out to be as valuable as I dreamed. In the hockey world, they did fairly well, but those were always protected in boxes at the very least, and the really nice ones in top loaders. And so when I got back into the hobby, just like everybody else or so many other people during COVID times, I had a collection that was actually in really, really good condition. And so there was copious amounts of cards because it hadn't been sorted through since the 80s, or actually I guess early 90s, when I went off to university. And so then I got back into it because I'd heard there was a sports card boom, of course. And so the first thing I did, because I hadn't looked at my cards for years, was graded some and sold through my cards, and then I instantly missed it. And once I was virtually cardless, then I'm like, oh, well, this sucks. I really enjoyed that process. And so then I don't know if it's ironic or not, but I started the process of going back and reacquiring some of those cards. And then the nice thing since then is that I've looked backwards. So I collected really the 80s and 90s when I was a kid, and I've really liked going back in time. I'm a sports freak. I love sports. I've always liked sports. And a bit of a sports historian. I was one of those weird kids when I was a kid that I'd read like record books and things like that. So I knew stats like crazy. So I've always been a bit of a historian when it comes to sports. And so cards, especially as an adult now, has facilitated that love of going back and learning history. But then I also dabble a little bit in the modern day because I'm still a sports fan. And so there are sports that are going on right now that I'm interested in. And I'm not a gambler, so I don't gamble, I don't bet, but this is a way to almost have that extra skin in the game. And my favorite players, the players who I predict, of course, is the sofa coach, that are going to be superstars. Am I right about that? Without having to, buy lottery tickets or go to the casino and bet on stuff like that. It's kind of gambling, but it's a well, I guess I listened to your last episode was actually quite a bit about gambling. So it can certainly be out of control gambling, but this is a way that I can have some skin in the game while, well, not really gambling. I don't really call it too terribly much gambling for me anyway.
Yeah. So you are a soccer collector, a hockey collector,
yes,
a football collector. And is there any certain players or any certain eras or sets or anything that you have a real fondness for?
Yeah. So my main player PCs would be in hockey, Mario Lemieux. He's got just such a great story. He's one of the all-time greats. He would probably be on most hockey historians' Mount Rushmore of all-time greats. But he's got the interesting story in that he beat all sorts of really, really significant health problems. Like right during the prime of his career, he had cancer. He had Hodgkin's lymphoma, and he had this great, like such a inspiring story of that season. So he was having his best season ever. Like he was going to rival looked like he was going to rival Gretzky's all-time scoring records. And then he got struck down with cancer, with a lymphoma, and he missed about a third of the season with getting radiation treatment and things like that. And he came back. Pretty sure it's a true story, but certainly legend has it that he came back. His first game back was the same day that he'd had his last radiation therapy. He scored a goal and an assist, and ultimately went on to win the scoring title by, I think it was 12 points, despite the fact that he missed essentially a third of the season. So pretty inspiring guy like that, right? But also fairly unassuming. He wasn't a spotlight darling. Like he wasn't a media darling. And so as a result, for a superstar, he's relatively affordable. Relatively, I say, compared to Gretzky or modern day Ovechkin or Crosby. In soccer, I like, for similar reasons, Ronaldo, not Cristiano Ronaldo, but the Brazilian Ronaldo Nazario. Probably he and Zinedine Zidane were the big superstars back in the 90s when I first got into international football or soccer. And again, because he's not the Messis or the Ronaldos or even the Pele, he's relatively affordable. So those are my main player PCs. But I've got some. I don't know that I'm terribly focused as a collector. That's something I'm still working on. I have a PC of a player that nobody cares about, but I do because I taught him as a student. He was in my classes for 3 years. So he's a hockey player that plays for the Minnesota Wild, a defenseman named Jake Middleton. So I use him as almost an excuse to buy high-end cards so I can see them and see how much I like them, what they look like in hand, because I can usually get them for under $10, even his high-end cards. And then that kind of helps me to determine, okay, for bigger name players, is this a card that I actually like? And then probably my favorite PC right now is I've been collecting autographed rookie cards of deceased Hall of Famers that I watched play. Now, this is mostly it's exclusively hockey at this stage. I can see it branching out into other areas.
Yeah, and we should say too that I'm stereotyping, of course, Canadians, but you are coming to us from Ontario.
Yeah,
and
Ontario, Canada, not Ontario, California.
Right, exactly, Ontario, Canada. Not that Americans don't also love hockey necessarily, but I just like to also provide the context of where your experience is.
Right, correct, yes. So in Southern Ontario, if you didn't play hockey as a kid, then you must be brilliant and the brain, right? And so I was probably not the brain. Now, I wasn't a brilliant hockey player or athlete either, but I tried really hard. So yes, hockey was certainly, hockey and baseball were my big sports when I was a kid. Now our playing season for baseball tends to be fairly short because we have in southwestern Ontario, we have fairly extreme weather. It gets really, really hot and humid in the summer, but really, really cold and snowy in the winter. So baseball, by November, it's pretty nasty to be playing baseball. Now I know the World Series is over by that point, and so is minor league, but it's not like you can be playing any kind of winter ball or anything like that. So our playing season really comfortably would be May, I suppose, sometimes to September, October. October, it's starting to get pretty cold. So yeah, baseball and soccer are shorter seasons. Hockey's the one that you can play all year long because it's indoors. Well, outdoors in the winter, but indoors as well in the summer.
Yeah, hearing you talk about the player, the hockey player who you were a teacher to, made me think of another Andrew, who's Andrew. He's St. Croix Cards, and he's
Yes.
also a teacher, and he collects a soccer player who he taught as well. And so to hear the connection that you have with the hockey player and the connection he has with the soccer player, yeah, and maybe most collectors don't know who they are, but man, that's the sort of connection to a player and to some cards that most people just will never experience. That's a pretty cool connection.
It is. It was cool. And I the thing that I kind of laugh about, because I see him every once in a while, he still comes back to the city, although it's been a couple of years now, I think, since I talked to him. But is that when I was a high school teacher, when I was his teacher, I gave him the advice that don't put all your eggs in one basket, because most players don't make it, right? Like, I know you're a top rated pick, but most players don't make it. They don't make it in the pros. Well, he made it.
It's good he didn't listen to you. No,
yeah.
He's doing great.
Yeah.
And so I want to start to move a little bit now toward the teaching side of it, and then eventually come back together and merge back with cards. What is the subject that you teach in high school?
I teach engineering. So it's engineering, robotics, that's, electrical engineering. We do a lot of programmable systems with microcontrollers like Arduinos or ESP32s. I know that as soon as I start talking about that, most people's eyes glaze over, but that's what I teach.
Very good. And you mentioned that your team recently went to Worlds, right? Or the World's Robotics Competition?
Yes. So I coach several robotics teams. And one of the teams, for the first time ever this year, made the World Championships. So we were down in Dallas, Texas at the beginning of May, competing against schools or teams, not always schools, but teams, high school teams from about 60 different countries. And competing against the best in the world. And it was quite the experience.
Well, congratulations to your team. That's fantastic. We started talking behind the scenes probably a 3 months ago, whenever it was. And yeah, we were talking about cards a little bit, but we got on the subject of the importance of failing. Mm-hmm. And this is something that comes up a lot when you are a teacher. You're a teacher. I'm a teacher. I teach at the college level. And one thing that I see a lot, and I see it more and more every year, is there is a real fear about failing because of what it could mean. Now, at the college level, it sometimes will mean that they just didn't do well and they're embarrassed, but it also might mean like they have scholarship implications. They have to keep a certain GPA, or they want to get into graduate school, right? And so the grades have to be a certain level. And so I can say all I want to, hey, failure is really important. But to them, it's like, no, you don't understand what it means. And I say, I do, but still failure is really important. And then I just really became interested in what you had to say about it, because this is something that you've studied and thought a lot about, the importance of failure and the lessons that we learn. It matters for cards. It matters for real life. What is your interest and fascination with incorporating failure into how you teach?
Probably started when I started the engineering. Definitely from an educator's perspective, it started when I began the engineering program, which would have been, 13 years ago or something like that. And engineering tends to attract really brilliant students. And so I'm a spoiled educator. I'm a spoiled teacher. I tend to get great kids in my class who are eager to learn. When teachers get together to complain about their students, most teachers are saying, I can't get my kids to work. And I say, I can't get my kids to stop. So that's the type of kid that I have in my class. And when I first started, I was getting really boring projects from them. And like, they were technically sound. There was nothing wrong with them. They were just uninspiring. They were boring. And as someone who probably reflects possibly too often, I started reflecting on this. And why would it be that I'm getting the best students that are giving me perfectly acceptable assignments, but they're just boring? And I realized, well, when I was that age, I would have done the same thing, because I was obsessed by grades. I wanted the best grades. I was competitive. I was friends with the smartest guy in the school. I wanted to beat him. I never did, but I wanted to beat him. And so when you're wanting great grades, you can't risk being creative, because if you're creative, then you might fail. And if you fail, well, then you don't beat the smartest guy in the school. You don't get the grades. And so when I realized that of course it's so obvious, they're not risking because they don't want to fail. Then I went about, okay, well, how do I encourage them to understand, or how do I get them to understand that failure isn't the end of the world? And in fact, failure can be the beginning of something pretty amazing. And so I started to incorporate that into my classes and figuring out, okay, how can I get these smart, capable kids to accept that failure isn't the F word that we want to avoid, right? It's an F word that's acceptable in school, and in fact should be more acceptable. Sadly, it's not super accepted right now in today's educational climate, where everybody needs to pass. Because I think failure is a really, really important part of learning. And if you go back, any one of us, anything that we learned to do, we failed over and over. Everything from walking, nobody walked the first time successfully, I don't think. To shooting a basketball, no one had hit one from the free throw line the first time they shot it. No one, pretty much anything, right? Anything that's worth doing, you had to work through failure for. So why is learning any different, or learning in school any different? And I think, so that's really the origin story of my studying and thinking about failure when it comes to education. And then of course that can spread to everything. So I now start every one of my classes, first day of classes, I walk in and say, I hope you all fail. And that gets them, now most of them know me by now, and they know that's my line. But then I kind of followed up and say, like, if you're a capable student and you're not failing, it means that you're not pushing yourself. You're not really learning. If you're able to get 95 or 100% in this class, then you probably shouldn't be in this class. You should be in the next class where you'll be more challenged. So, and now I do have to, assuage their worries that this doesn't mean they're going to get crappy grades. And so I've had to come up with that failure does not mean failing the class. Failure means hopefully learning and progressing and becoming a better student and ultimately a better engineer, or better fill in the blank whatever you're failing at.
How did you go about studying and researching failure? Because you can't just walk into a classroom and say, I'm going to try this now. Like, you actually have to understand what you are plugging in to your students, plugging into your classroom. So how did you go about learning about how to use failure?
Well, a lot of experimenting, a lot of reflection, because I was one of those students back in the day, right? I was one of those students who, when I looked back at my own life, I did well in school, not because I was super brilliant, but because I gave the teachers exactly what they wanted. Because teachers usually let it be known what they want. And so you can follow that formula and get great grades. When I graduated from university and got my first job, I realized how little I knew how to actually do. And so I had to learn real skills on the job. And so that, from my perspective, when I started reflecting on myself, what would have made me more equipped? Well, being able to push more where it's safe to push, right? In school, there's no financial loss unless you blow up a robot or something like that. Then I suppose there's some financial loss. But for the most part, in school, there's no financial loss. If I'm dealing with a client in the real world, and I screw something up of theirs, well, now there's potential financial loss. And so the stakes are much higher. And even at a university or college, the stakes are higher because you're paying to be there. So if you're not getting the great grades, or if you're failing out, you're not learning, well, you've just wasted a lot of money. So all that kind of reflection, and then a lot of experimenting. I have the luxury of being the only, for a while at least, I was the only teacher in this region that taught engineering. So my principals gave me a lot of leeway to be able to test and experiment. And so I'd experiment in class and see, okay, does this work? Does this allow kids to actually be creative? Oh no, that didn't work. And so I gradually refined, and certainly have not perfected it. I'm still working on it, but I've gotten better at getting kids to accept failure as an essential component of learning.
Okay, so I have one more question before we get this back to cards, which is, what are the benefits? Why is failing so important?
Well, I say that the difference between, so I say this to my students all the time, is that the difference between you and a professional engineer is not intelligence, likely. It's that the professional engineer has had a lot more experience with failing. So if I gave you, my high school student, the same project as I gave my friend, the professional engineer, the professional engineer would finish it quicker and better, because they wouldn't go down this path that inevitably leads to failure. They wouldn't go down this path. They wouldn't go down this path because they've already been down those paths. and they know that they don't work. So they'll immediately eliminate a lot of the potential options and down to, 2, 3, 4 options that they can experiment with. Whereas my students haven't been able to do that yet. They haven't failed enough to know that. So they're still experimenting with like 40 or 50 different avenues that they can experiment with and possibly fail at. So that's why I think it's so important to gain that experience, that failure, especially if you reflect on it, if you learn from it, it's an extremely valuable tool, and also teaches perseverance, right? Like failure is not the end. You can come back from failure stronger and better.
Have you ever encountered failure in the world of sports cars?
Yeah, I laugh. Yes, of course. Probably far too often, but yes.
Yeah. So how is that important, right? I think we've all heard stories, right, of not just, oh, I should not have sold this then, or I should have waited a little bit longer. But there's all these. I feel like we all have a horror story, at least one horror story where we think back to either when we were kids or to when we got back in the hobby. And you and I have a very sort of a similar trajectory of, I can't believe I did X. I can't believe I did Y. Do you think that there is a benefit to having those sort of cringe type moments in cards, and why so?
Absolutely. As with anything in life, failure is only failure if you don't learn from it, and if that's the end. But if you learn from failure, you're going to inevitably get better and stronger at it. So yeah, like I have the same type of failures as I'm sure so many other people, where I've sold at the wrong time, or paid way too much for a card, or bought the wrong card, or bought the wrong player. Those aren't unique. But maybe they a lot of collectors, I imagine, don't know that those aren't unique, and we love this hobby. And I think that if more collectors knew that they weren't alone in their failures, they might actually stay. Now, I've been fortunate enough to not make such a colossal failure, have such a colossal failure that I'm out. Like it's too expensive. I can't deal with it. But I think some people have. And if they could have been maybe saved from that failure, or at least cushioned on that failure, so that because they knew a little bit more from hearing from other people's, they might still be in the hobby. So an example that I can give that has not happened to me, but I've heard of people. So what in the hockey world, there's the Cup. The Cup is the glamour brand, the highest end brand.
I love that brand. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they're very, very expensive cards. And there's been a lot of patch swapping going on over the past several years, right? Where there are some people that have been trying to make a database, an online database of known swapped patches. But still, like if you forked out $10, $15, $20, $50,000 on a card that then you find has had a patch swapped, because it's this beautiful patch, but it's been swapped out, and it's that you didn't know about this site that has them posted, but other people do know about this site. Now you're stuck with that. Like that's the type of failure that, unless you're quite wealthy, even if you are quite wealthy, you probably don't come back from. And so learning from that kind of stuff and having these types of things publicized might save you from that. Or at least, encourage people to get their education before they fork out that huge number on a card. To if they love the Cup, try some $100 ones instead, and then just like check them out, check out what they feel like, what they smell like, what does a real authentic NHL jersey feel like, as opposed to one that you can buy from whatever sports store at the mall.
Right, and there's something about the camaraderie and the comfort that comes with realizing you're not the only one to have made a mistake. And in fact, if you didn't, either you did and just don't realize it, or you're collecting it in a lane maybe so narrow that you don't even realize the mistakes that you're making. Maybe there's a lack of introspection, or who knows what. But I think you're spot on. I love what you said about we need to see the failures. I'm going to share one real quick that I just did recently. I talk a lot about how impatient I am. And I think that, I'm getting better. Well, I don't know, a couple months ago now, I got my mind set on a card. It was there's this one. I'll just go ahead and share it. This is a 2024 Topps Chrome Shohei Ohtani True Blue refractor out of 150. And I don't own a lot of Otani cards, but I thought I own one rookie card of his in an Angels uniform. I want to own one of his first cards in a Dodger uniform. And if I'm just going to get one, I might as well make it a cool one. And this one I thought, hey, beautiful color match, the True Blue out of 150. It's not like Ray Wave or what any of the other parallels. It's one that people will recognize and that I think has some sort of long-term nostalgic staying power for what I would like. And, Otani is a really popular player, obviously. I'm not saying anything that people don't already know. And I was looking through Cardlet and realized the cards don't pop up a lot, and they're starting to pop up less and less frequently because people are just grabbing this card. And I had seen that someone hadn't had one for about 4 or 6 weeks, and finally one pops up, and it was it was a buy it now, but with an offer on there. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to go for it, right? And I didn't go back and look at what they were going for. I didn't look at any trends. I just thought I needed this card. It was the same thing that I would have done in 2020 when I first got back into the hobby. And, sometimes you learn, I guess sometimes you don't. and I grabbed it, and I'm glad it's beautiful. It's a great looking card. And, I don't really care a lot about PSA 10s, and I do plan on having it graded. I just want to have it sort of uniform for how I have my other cards, right? I looked at it, I'm like, oh, this might be like a 9, maybe a 10, maybe an 8. Who knows, right? I'm done guessing at whatever PSA is going to do. Yeah. And I was like, great, I got it. And in the 6 or 8 weeks since I got it, there have been probably 5 more that have popped up. A couple have been more, a couple have been less. And then in a Facebook group that I'm in, and I'm not very active in it, this card popped up in a PSA 9 for like half the price that I paid for it. And if I had just been able to pump the brakes a little bit, instead of frightening myself into thinking you're not going to be able to find this card that you want, right? Then I would have some extra funds now. But here I am still making the exact same mistakes. But, it happens. We still do it. And I'm sure if I'm in this hobby 10 years from now, I'll still be making these mistakes. But I think you're right. It's important to talk about. So maybe somebody out there will hear it's like, oh, dumb move, Dave. And you know what? I made the same dumb move.
Yeah. Right? But even though you repeated the error, and we all do that, every time that you do it, you learn a little bit, and you're gonna. So if before you buy the Grail card or whatever the card that you've been saving for forever, you might pump the brakes a little bit and like, wait. Made this mistake with Shohei. I've made this mistake other times. Is this actually the card that I want? Now, I suppose if it's a really, really rare card, you might not have the time to pump the brakes. But one of the things that I've learned though too is that now I guess maybe I don't play in the area where there's only one of them, and if I don't hit it now, then I'm never going to have another one. So I guess I don't know what it's like to play in that pool, but I guess kind of an apt title. I play in the shallower end of the pool. So for me, expensive cards are getting into 4 digits. I've got a family and things like that, right? I've got other responsibilities. So if I'm going to pay something that's 4 digits, I pause and I think about it. And sometimes I've thought about it too long and I've lost it. But I think in my position where I have to be responsible financially because I've got 2 young kids and a family, that I'd rather lose it than regret spending it, because I've done that. I've spent too much on a card. I'm like, I should not have bought that Erling Haaland, especially not that Erling Haaland, right? Like it was the wrong card. It was just the Topps Chrome base. It wasn't anything special. Blah blah blah, right? So being able to make those mistakes will, I think, hopefully help me from making the mistake on a bigger scale later on.
I love this idea that I'd rather lose the card than spend too much on it and regret it, right? Because I think we can resent our collection sometimes, or resent some cards sometimes. And when it gets to this, you might have sort of a temporary, shucks, what a bummer, I didn't get the card that I want. Because it's not like you're going for the most time, like for one of ones or anything like that, right? But if you do win the card, but you paid too much for it, what happens then when you pull it out and look at it from time to time? Do you think about the card, Or do you think about
Exactly.
what you paid for it and think,
Right.
man, ugh, I should
Yeah.
not have done that. Bad choice.
Yeah.
Bad
Yeah.
choice. Yeah.
Now, some of those mistakes I keep around. I bought I'm actually looking at one. I didn't pull it over because I wasn't going to show it, but it's I bought a fake, a fake Guy Lafleur rookie card. So another Hall of Fame legend for hockey, and it was too good to be true. As it turns out, it was not true.
It was too good to
It
be
was
true.
too good to be true, right? But it was one of those things like, oh, this is amazing. Yes, I want that for this ridiculously low amount of money. And then, oops. Now, I have kept that on display as kind of a reminder to myself. And from that, I learned that, okay, I'm going to, for some of these big cards, I learned stuff, right? Like I learned to buy commons from each one of those sets. So the big cards that I want for my collection, I now have commons from that same set. So if I ever am presented with the option, assuming that it's ungraded, if it's raw, if it's graded, then I hope that I can trust the grader. But if it's raw, now I've got something to compare, right? I've got like a common card that nobody's going to fake. Common card to be able to feel and just and inspect and look what inspect what it looks like, what the back looks like as compared to the one that I've got in front of me that I'm considering buying. So it's again, like I was lucky in that I didn't pay a ridiculous amount. It was too good to be true, but that was a good learning experience. And will it stop me from buying a fake again? Probably not, but I'm not going to be completely trusting. At least if I'm going to end up with a fake again, I'll at least know that it's a possibility, I think, because I'm going to go in cynically or suspicious, doing what I can to protect myself.
With a healthy skepticism.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. It's funny you said that. It makes me think back again. When I first got into it, I went and I wanted a Mark McGuire 85 Topps USA card, right? Yep. And I had one, and I sold most of my collection. I thought, I wish I still had it, so I bought one, and it looked amazing, looked absolutely incredible. That's because it was a fake, right? So I sent it off to SGC, and it came back, and they caught it. Like, no, this is nope, no, not good. So I ended up throwing it away, right? But a couple of years later, maybe a few years later, I was looking into getting a Bob Gibson rookie card, and I didn't even know if I wanted to grade it. I thought I might be just keeping it raw. But before I did that, I reached out to this other collector, longtime vintage guy who I trust, and I said, I'm looking to get a low-end Bob Gibson. I want it to be raw. Do you recommend that I buy one raw or just buy a low-end slab and then crack it? And if I had not had that other experience of buying the raw Mark McGuire that turned out to be fake, I probably would not have reached out to this vintage collector to say, what do you think I should do? At which point he said, I would just buy a low end and then just crack it. Because at least then you have mostly an idea that it's real. I ended up not buying one anyway. But just you have that sort of experience. So what would you then, how would you, this is a funny word to use, how might you comfort a friend or another collector who maybe hears this interview and they think, I can relate to this. I recently did X, Y, and Z, and I'm kind of bummed out. And they reached out to you and they said, hey, I just made a mistake. I'm really down on myself. How do you get past mistakes? How do you get past failures and to kind of put it behind you? I don't mean to forget it, but to stop dwelling on it.
Yeah, it's that, I guess it's that mind shift, right? That failure. We've grown accustomed. I'm assuming it's the same in the US as it is in Canada. That failure is something to be feared, and so we cover it up and we pretend it didn't happen because we're way too good to fail. I'm not a failure. I don't fail, and so if we can shift that mindset that to fail is to be human, and to fail means it's a learning opportunity. So if it was a friend that was reaching out to me, I would hope it wasn't like this colossal failure that's going to hurt financially or whatever. But I mean, if it's failure that hurts, that smarts, but it's not an end game, then okay, well, what can we learn from that? Because they commiserate and like, oh yeah, I've been there, yeah, or I haven't been there, but I've done this, and oh my gosh, yeah, we're both so stupid, right? Wait, look at the dummies. We should start a sports card for dummies podcast or something like that together. But then once we get past the commiserating with each other, okay, like let's make it worthwhile. Because a failure is a failure if you don't learn anything from it. But if we can learn from it, then we're going to be that much better. And in anything that's worthwhile, and hopefully if it's a friend who's in the hobby, then the hobby is worthwhile. As Jeremy Lee's podcast says, it's a lifestyle. But if it's worthwhile, then it's worth getting better at. And to get better means to push yourself out of your comfort zone and sometimes taking risk, and that means sometimes failing. So yeah, I guess that's what I would try to encourage them to do, is that this is an opportunity to get better.
So I asked you if you would be comfortable sharing some of your own struggles, or maybe a failure that you had, or some examples of some things in your past as well. You brought a couple of cards along. Would you mind sharing those?
Sure. Cards or failures, or because
either one.
Okay.
Let's go with failures first.
Let's talk about some failures then, since we're on the topic.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, there are lots of them, but one of the early. So I'm from Canada. I'm in Canada, and one of the things that was a real struggle at the beginning was the idea that so many great cards are in the US, but in Canada, it's really expensive to ship. So shipping costs are really, really high. And Americans often are afraid to ship to Canada because they're like, oh my gosh, like the quotes that I'm getting on shipping are ridiculous. And so a lot of Americans don't actually ship to Canada. And so I don't know about ripped off, but I mean, I got hurt early, because I bought a big, like, not a big card, but I mean, probably a $400 card, which is sizable to me, down in the US, and had it shipped home. And so paid an exorbitant amount of shipping, paid an exorbitant amount of duty fees getting it across the border. And in the end, I ended up paying probably 1.5 times what I thought I paid, or what I should have paid, right? Because I probably overpaid for the card too. It was early in my collecting journey. And so that really hurt. And my initial reaction, of course, is an overreaction. Like, okay, I'm never buying from the States again. Like this dumb. I got hammered with that. But if you eliminate the US market, well, you're eliminating a heck of a lot of really nice cards and some really good friends, right? And so what it made me do is dig into the alternatives and shipping, and learning how to ship properly in Canada. Because of course, being in Canada, I sell to a lot, buy and sell to a lot of Canadians. And like, I'll take this moment, I suppose, to educate Americans, if you don't know, why shipping is so expensive in Canada. Canada's huge, second largest landmass of any country in the world, but our population is pretty small. I don't know if we're in the top 50 populated country. I'm sure we're not actually in the top 50 populated countries in the world. So that means that our postal system, and frankly, even our courier systems, have to be able to pay for costs to ship from one end of this massive country to the other, often with no towns or cities for hundreds of miles in between. So it's not like they're regular post offices or depots, sorting depots or anything like that. So it makes sense that shipping's expensive in Canada, I guess. But so what I learned is alternatives to doing business or buying in the States. And I use a service called Ship My Cards now, which is a great service. And so they have an address in Oregon, which is apparently sales tax free. So that means that I'm not paying tax twice, right? So I ship it to this Oregon address. I don't pay sales tax. And then I can keep it in my Ship My Cards vault or account until I've got enough cards that justify the shipping cost to come back. And so then, instead of paying exorbitant rates over and over and over again, I can pay it once or twice a year and get a whole bunch of cards back, and then pay the tax once. Like, I'm paying tax when it comes across the border. So little things like that go a long ways to opening up a massive market, and opened up the opportunity to do some really great deals, and getting to know some people down in the US that I otherwise, if I hadn't screwed that up or hadn't been burned by that, but hadn't learned from it, that just wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, you had to go through it in order to learn from it.
Mm-hmm. And it forced me to dig into the whole shipping dilemma conundrum, right? Because if I'm going to be in this hobby, I need to be able to ship, buy and sell. So I learned how to do it.
It reminds me of it was around 21 or so. I started selling a few cards on Twitter, which I don't have that account anymore, but I didn't know what it was going to be like. And I sold the card to somebody from Canada, and he's like, "Will you ship here?" I said, "Yeah, sure." He's like, "Oh my God, thank you." And I just agreed to it. I didn't know the price or anything until I got to the to the post office of what I was doing. Again, failure, right?
Mm.
And then ended up getting rid of about 30% of the profit of my card,
Right.
just trying to cover
Yeah.
the cost of postage. And so the next time, I didn't stop selling to Canada, but I did say the next time, sure, but I'm going to need to up the price on the shipping.
Right. Yeah.
Got another one? Any other stories?
Oh, sure. Just things like when I first got back into the hobby, eBay is obviously the biggest marketplace, and so that was the only marketplace as far as I was concerned for a while, until I discovered other marketplaces that don't have fees. Now, I'm not an eBay basher. I know a lot of people are, but eBay now I've learned is the perfect marketplace for some cards. Because you're going to get the most eyes of any other marketplace. And so that's great. If I'm looking for a card that I can't find in Facebook groups or my card post, the other platforms that I very often use, then okay, I'm going to have a better shot of finding it on eBay. So I still have all my saved searches on eBay. But I now realize that it's not the default. Every card that I sell there, I'm going to lose 15-ish%. Now, is it worth it? Probably for the right cards, because I don't own a card store, right? I don't have a storefront that I'm paying rent on or paying employees. So 15% is pretty low for some cards, but 15% is pretty high for others. So just, after having been burned a couple times by trying to flip, which I've realized I'm not a very good flipper, but trying to buy a card like a Josh Allen card, bought up the right player at the right time, buy it in the off season on eBay and pay, shipping and tax and all that kind of stuff, and then selling it a couple months later during the prime selling time and paying 15% again. Like, well, no profit, even though the value went up. So I did the right thing, but there's no profit. In fact, there's loss there. And so just that kind of those are other failures, right? We're okay. First of all, I'm not good at flipping, so that's fine. I'll not do that very often. But secondly, learning other platforms. And so I've discovered great platforms like, well, my card post and Facebook groups. I'm in some excellent Facebook groups that allow me to buy and sell quite nicely.
Terrific. Thank you. This is fantastic. My mind is spinning as I hear how you think about failure and learning and how they work together. As we start to wind down here a little bit, let's see you brought some cards.
I did.
Yeah, let's see a couple of cards that maybe some that you just like from your collection or recent pickups or whatever. The floor is yours. Let's see if you
okay. So one of the PCs that I don't know that I did mention it about the deceased Hall of Fame. These are hockey players, but Hall of Famers that I saw play. Now, so these are a couple of them. I don't know if you can see these very well. They've got a big reflection on that one. There we go. So this is a Guy Lafleur rookie card. So this is the one that I bought a fake of by accident. This is actually a legitimate one. And it's autographed. And the reason I've kind of gone this route is because back in the 80s and 90s, when I was first collecting, it was a no-no to autograph. Oh, yeah. So this is Guy Lafleur for the audio listeners. This is Guy Lafleur 1971 O-Pee-Chee, his rookie card, in a BGS 8 for the card and a 9 autograph. And then this is a Mike Bossy 1978 O-Pee-Chee in the card is a 6, but it's a really nice 6. It's nicely centered. And the autograph is a 10. So the reason why I got into these in this collection, I've got others too that I won't necessarily bore you with, but back in the old days, it was a no-no to get an autograph. And so I would have never done that when I was a kid because my sister's boyfriend taught me, well, now it takes on the value of the autograph, which is nothing compared to the value of the card. So of course you never do that. Well, isn't it kind of cool that some people were rebels back then and did it anyway? Like this card, this Lafleur card, I spoke with a guy that knows a heck of a lot more about autographs than I do, and have kind of determined that this is a playing days autograph, probably towards the end of his career, but still a playing days autograph. So during that era when you shouldn't be getting a nice card like this autograph. So I just kind of really like that idea of like, these are more unique. And because they're deceased, they're not signing anymore, right? So it's my way of connecting to my experiences, my lifetime, and also getting something that you don't just get all the time, right? Like it's not like these are super rare, like Mike Bossy autographed rookie cards. I'm sure I don't actually know what the pop count is on these, but I'm sure it's well into double digits, maybe even triple digits. Same with the Lafleur, but it's not like there are thousands and thousands and thousands of them, right? So it's giving me a little slice of scarcity while being kind of cool based on my, like, it's everything that I grew up not being told not to do, and then loving the fact that other people did it.
Amazing. And I loved how you have sort of narrowed that down, because I mean, NHL has been around for, decades, nearly a century, right? And you could just say, oh, I'm going for Hall of Fame autos. But the way that you narrowed it to the players that you saw, like, what a unique thing to you. I love hearing that.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that if I finish that, I'll expand it onto the older ones. But some of those older legends are very pricey, right? So
Sure. All right. What else you got?
Okay, so this one's not a very valuable one, but I've got 2 daughters. And one of the things that they mentioned really, really early when I got back into the hobby is, why are all your cards of men, Daddy? And I'm like, well, I didn't really have a very good response to that. So they are quite into, they're getting into soccer and women's soccer with me, and they're getting into the PWHL, which is the women's professional hockey league. So I'm deliberately branching out and to try to invite them into the hobby with me. And so this is an autograph, or not, sorry, this is not an autograph. This is a rookie card of Christine St. Clair. So she is a Canadian legendary soccer player. In fact, she holds the record. She's got more international goals than Cristiano Ronaldo. So more international goals than any other soccer player. I believe that's still true. That certainly was true at one point. I don't think anybody's broken it yet. So she's a legend in Canada. Now this card, I think it's a PSA 10. So it's a gem mint card. I think this card might have cost me $20 or something like that. Like they're criminally low. Now this is just a base upper deck, so it's probably printed to the moon. But still, like, this is a nice, cool way of commemorating a Canadian legend and kind of inviting my kids in and seeing them represented. I've got other women's cards too, but this is kind of a cool one just because she is such a legend in the women's soccer world and in Canada especially.
Love it. I love that was prompted by their questions, right?
Yeah.
That they're paying attention. They're thinking about their surroundings, not just looking at the piece of cardboard that Dad has, right? They are thinking about their world and expanding how you collect. That's amazing.
Right. Yeah. Why am I not represented there?
Yeah.
I don't know. Right. I don't have a good answer for that.
Great question. And you are right. Right. You are right. And we will change that.
Yeah.
You got one more before we sign off?
Sure. Well, I've got a couple more, but do I want to go? Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I have pulled this one out. This one's just a beauty. This is Ronaldo R9, Ronaldo Nazario. This is his one of his rookie stickers, which is pretty awesome. But more of a story here, I guess. This is another personal one. So these go in pairs. Can I get it without a reflection? There we go.
That's good.
So on the right here is Jean Béliveau's rookie card. It's in a PSA 1. I don't know if you can see that on the screen. It's a PSA 1, but it's a beautiful PSA 1. Like the eye appeal of this is great. If you get into the right light, you can see that there's a crease that runs across his pants. But I mean, you can't really see that unless you're looking for it. So why is this a PSA 1? Well, because it's a technical grade, but it's a beautiful card. Now, this is my father-in-law's favorite player. So he grew up loving Jean Béliveau. The card on my left is Teeter Kennedy, so Ted Kennedy, and it's his rookie card from 1951. And again, it's in an SGC 1. So it's a low grade. And again, it's beautiful. Now, the reason why it's low grade is because there's paper loss or paper addition. I can't tell which on the back. It was obviously glued into someone's, whole photo album or something. This is my dad's favorite player. And so the pair here is my 2 dads, my dad-in-law, my father-in-law, and my own dad who has passed away. Father-in-law is still around. But just the idea of being able to get their favorite players, their rookie cards, really inexpensively, because they're low grade, but they're beautiful low grade. So that to me I just got this one to finish off this collection. I got this one probably about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago for a criminally low auction. And so then that's what gave me the idea. I'm like, let's see if I can get a Teeter Kennedy, a Ted Kennedy, in the same grade. So same low grade with the same requirement that it's low grade, inexpensive, but beautiful.
This has been amazing. This has been what I hoped it would be. And I appreciate that you brought your understanding of how failure can help in the classroom to just a little bit of time for how we might be able to incorporate it into the card space as well. So as we let you go and say thank you for your time, is there anything that you would like to leave us with about anything in terms of our own collecting and maybe sort of the failures along the way?
I guess just the little saying, I don't know, it's not a saying, but something that I try and remind my students, that of all the forbidden F words in the world, the 4-letter F words that we wag our fingers at, fail shouldn't be one of them, because it's natural, it's human. Unless you are God, you're going to fail. And so instead of trying to cover it up and pretend like it didn't happen, or pretend that you're perfect and don't fail, reflect on them, learn from them, and maybe if you have the confidence to, share them so that others can learn from them as well.
Great stuff. Andrew at Fair Star Cards on Instagram, thank you for coming on today, and hope we can do this again soon down the line.
That'd be great. Thanks for having me, Dave. It was awesome. It's awesome getting to chat with you.